It's 7 p.m. Wednesday, September 4th here in Seoul.
Coming up on News Center tonight. Finance Minister Wang Yi says the public sector will invest tens of billions of dollars by the end of the year to help boost Korea's sluggish economy.
President Moon Jae-in hails a joint industrial zone in Myanmar's economic hub of Yangon as a means to boost economic ties between the two nations.
A three-way economic seminar between the two Koreas and Russia in Vladivostok is abruptly called off after North Korea's delegation failed to show up.
And Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam is reportedly set to publicly announce the withdrawal of a controversial extradition bill that sparked months of protests. News Center begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Arirang News Center, live from Seoul. I'm Han Daeun.
And I'm Noaram. Thank you as always for joining us this evening. We begin at South Korea's finance ministry. It has announced a range of measures to boost the local economy, which is suffering from falling exports and low consumer inflation.
Part of those measures is to increase investment by the public sector, which Finance Minister Wang Yi says will reach tens of billions of dollars by the end of the year. Our Yoon Jung-min starts us off.
South Korea's finance ministry has announced a range of plans to boost the economy, including more investment from the public and private sectors. With exports weak, the idea is to revitalize domestic consumption. In a meeting Wednesday with related ministers, Finance Minister Wang Yi said investment by public institutions will reach some $45 billion within the year, an increase of around $825 million from earlier plans. Public companies, including the Korea Land and Housing Corporation, will invest more funds to expand social overhead capital, building more public housing, roads, and electrical grid infrastructure. The government will also redirect around $1.4 billion to boost overall investment in the domestic economy. And the Finance Ministry, Hong said, will encourage local governments to make use of subsidies that amount to some $8.7 billion. More private investment projects will be launched, including the building of logistics centers for global e-commerce as well as shopping malls, while easing loan conditions for those buying homes that have gone unsold for a long time. To help exporters, insurance premiums where exchange rate fluctuations will be lowered, and more loans will be made available to small and mid-sized exporters. To boost consumer sentiment, the government plans to provide more subsidies for those buying home appliances and issue more gift certificates for use at traditional markets or small businesses. Drivers will get discounts on tolls until mid-October, and more young people will be eligible special tour packages on Korea's national rail system. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in is in Yangon, aiming to build closer economic ties with Myanmar. He attended a groundbreaking ceremony for the two countries' joint industrial complex, where he unveiled his roadmap for mutual economic growth. Our Park Hee-jun in Myanmar for us tonight.
President Moon Jae-in is in Yangon to enhance bilateral economic cooperation and co-prosperity with Myanmar. Myanmar is a Southeast Asian nation that has great economic potential, seeing a steady economic growth of 6 to 7% each year. Recognized particularly for its abundant human and natural resources, it's a market that many South Korean companies are fishing opportunities for. Korea is the sixth largest investor in Myanmar, with around 200 Korean companies currently doing business in the country. In efforts to channel such potential into concrete economic benefits, President Moon attended a business forum and a groundbreaking ceremony for a South Korea-Myanmar joint industrial complex in Yangon on Wednesday. The site aims to build a more efficient economic partnership between the two countries. Korea would help Myanmar improve its infrastructure, which in return gives Korean companies better access to the Myanmar markets. This is a great step forward for Myanmar, a country that's been hobbled by poor infrastructure and struggling to fully tap into its immense potential. The $108 million project is aimed for completion by 2024. In his keynote speech at the event, President Moon revealed that South Korea and Myanmar will work to bolster their cooperation in people-to-people exchanges and infrastructure. They will also work to enhance cultural exchanges and cooperation in the household goods sector. The president says that more exchanges in the K-pop, fashion, and cosmetics industries will help the people of the two nations gain a better understanding of one another. Wrapping up his trip to Myanmar after forging closer economic ties with the country, President Moon leaves for Laos on Thursday, the last stop that completes his pledge to visit all ASEAN nations within his term. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News, Yangon.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi made a 3-day visit to North Korea and held talks with North Korean counterparts, including top diplomats Lee Yong-ho and Lee Soo-yong. And there is running speculation that he could meet with leader Kim Jong-un himself before returning to Beijing. Our Lee Min-sun has late details.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is expected to wrap up his 3-day visit to North Korea on Wednesday. Before Wang leaves for China, some say there's a possibility that he could meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Neither Beijing nor Pyongyang has confirmed this, but observers say a visit by Kim Jong-un to China could be arranged if the meeting does take place.
Since it's a high-level visit to North Korea following Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit in June, it is highly likely that Wang could deliver Xi's letter, formally inviting Kim Jong-un. This year is also a historic year marking the 70th anniversary of bilateral ties, so it's very likely that Kim would visit China.
Observers say if Kim does make his 5th visit to China, it is likely to take place in early October. October 6th marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Pyongyang and Beijing. October 1st is also the 70th National Day of the People's Republic of China, celebrating the country's foundation, which will be marked by a large military parade at Tiananmen Square. Wang's visit comes at a time when working-level talks between North Korea and the U.S. have stalled. According to North Korean state media, Wang and his delegation paid tribute on Tuesday at the memorial to Chinese soldiers who fought alongside the North in the Korean War. Wang also met on Monday with his North Korean counterpart Lee Yong-ho and discussed various issues related to the Korean Peninsula and ways to further develop ties between Pyongyang and Beijing. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Delegations from South and North Korea are in Vladivostok, Russia, for the Eastern Economic Forum to discuss trilateral economic cooperation with Moscow. There was a 3-way meeting scheduled for today, but it's been abruptly called off. And the North Korean delegation was curiously absent from the forum. Our Oh Jung-hee has the latest.
Representatives of the two Koreas and Russia were set to discuss their trilateral economic cooperation at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok on Wednesday, but the seminar was canceled at the last minute. This due to what the forum said was the delegation's scheduling reasons. The main agenda would have been the 3 mega projects among Seoul, Pyongyang, and Moscow. They include connecting the Trans-Siberian Railway and Trans-Korean Railway, building a gas pipeline between South Korea and Russia that runs through North Korea, and forming a shared electrical grid among the 3 countries. A senior official from South Korea's Presidential Committee on Northern Economic Cooperation was to attend the event, as well as Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister and Far East Development Minister. But North Korea did not notify who would be representing Pyongyang for the seminar, and on Wednesday, the event was abruptly called off. The North Korea delegation, led by the regime's Vice Premier Lee Ryong-nam, arrived in Vladivostok earlier this week, but was absent at the forum on Wednesday. With top officials from South and North Korea converging on Vladivostok, the possibility had been raised of a surprise high-level inter-Korean meeting. But with the 3-party seminar canceled, those hopes have now been dashed. Watchers say that the current atmosphere on the Korean Peninsula, where dialogue has stalled between South Korea, the U.S., and North Korea, may have affected these setbacks at the Russian forum. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, here in Seoul, a 3-day forum to promote peace and security in the Asia-Pacific region will officially kick off tomorrow, which will be attended by senior officials and security experts from across the globe. And on the eve of the Defense Dialogue, vice ministerial level meetings were held. Our Kim Jae-hee has the highlights from today.
South Korea's Vice Defense Minister Park Jae-min asked his counterparts from other countries for their support in building peace on the Korean Peninsula. This comes during the vice ministerial level meetings held between Park and his counterparts from Singapore, Uzbekistan, Philippines, Ethiopia, Canada, and Kazakhstan on the sidelines of the Seoul Defense Dialogue 2019. The annual event kicked off on Wednesday at the Lotte Hotel in Seoul, bringing together hundreds of military officials and defense experts from 56 countries and 6 international organizations. Hosted by South Korea's Defense Ministry since 2012, the Multilateral Security Forum serves as a platform to discuss peninsular affairs and security issues in the Asia-Pacific region. The commander of U.S. Forces Korea, General Robert Abrams, and the Deputy Chief of Missions at the U.S. Embassy, Rob Rapson, were also among this year's guest list. This year's forum has drawn key focus, coming at a time of high tensions in the region, triggered by Seoul's recent decision to end its military intelligence sharing pact with Japan and the stalled nuclear talks between North Korea and the U.S. More decisions to enhance bilateral defense ties will follow over the next 2 days, with the official opening ceremony scheduled for 9 a.m. Korea time Thursday. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's Defense Minister Chung Kyung-do confirmed that North Korean troops have been deployed on the western border island of Hambak, but no coastal guns have been spotted. Speaking at the Parliamentary Defense Committee meeting today, Minister Chung said the South Korean military is closely monitoring the North Korean installations on the island. When asked why Pyongyang might have set up military facilities on an uninhabited island, Chung said they may be on the watch for possible North Korean defectors and to monitor other military facilities near the maritime border. In regards to whether Pyongyang's installations in the area is a violation of the September 19th military agreement signed last year, Chung said the facilities have existed from 2017, before the military pact was signed. The U.S. Forces Korea says it respects South Korea's decision to take back ownership of American military bases on the peninsula. In a statement released Tuesday, the USFK said it remains committed to cooperating with the South Korean government to return the U.S. installations to the South Korean public and local communities as quickly as possible. Among the 80 American bases in South Korea, 54 of them have already been returned. Discussions on returning 19 of the 26 remaining bases are ongoing, while talks on returning 7 bases have currently stalled. The U.S. has reportedly shifted its strategy on the Korean Peninsula, looking to pressure the South Korean government to side with the U.S. over China. Former U.S. Forces Korea Commander Vincent Brooks gives his insights on key issues related to the South Korea-U.S. alliance. Our Kim Ji-yeon with more.
Former U.S. Forces Korea Commander Vincent Brooks, in an interview with VOA on Monday, said Washington's request for Seoul to contribute more to defense costs is more focused on pressuring Seoul to participate in its military strategy in the Indo-Pacific to counter China's growing influence, along with its move to pressure China for the freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. The so-called Indo-Pacific U.S. strategy, designed with the Indian and Pacific Oceans at its center, is for the U.S. to strategically extend its partnership with East Asian countries with the aim of countering the rise of China as an economic and military power. Brooks said the request for a fair share of the costs includes the expansion of the crackdown of North Korean ships that are carrying prohibited exports of coal and oil. Brooks said all this signifies a turning point in Washington's strategy in terms of the South Korea-U.S. alliance, from the traditional viewpoint of suppressing the North Korean threat to curbing China's rising influence, in which Seoul may be increasingly pressured to choose between the U.S. or China. On the issue of the imminent return of U.S. military bases to South Korea, Brooks said the decision is up to the South Korean government, on the precondition that the agreement between the two sides of a specific timeline in moving the RK U.S. Combined Forces Command is resolved. This follows Seoul's decision late last month to seek an early return of more than 24 bases across the country, including the relocation of the U.S. Forces Korea headquarters from Seoul to Camp Humphreys in Pyeongtaek, south of Seoul, amid speculation of a widening rift in the alliance after Washington rebuked Seoul for its refusal to renew a military intel sharing pact with Japan. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Breaking news coming in from Hong Kong. Chief Executive Carrie Lam has just announced a formal withdrawal of the contentious extradition bill that stirred up 3 months of political unrest across the territory. The controversial bill would have allowed China to arrest and extradite Hong Kong dissidents to the mainland. After widespread protests, Lam initially announced the bill would be suspended, saying it was, quote, dead. However, protesters have fought for a full withdrawal, along with other demands to protect the rule of law and the so-called one country, two system framework. In local politics, after weeks of wrangling, rival parties have agreed to set a new date for Justice Minister nominee Cho Kuk's confirmation hearing. It will be held on Friday. Cho welcomed the decision, vowing to clarify corruption allegations against him and his family. Kim Min-ji reports.
South Korea's rival parties have agreed to hold a confirmation hearing for Justice Minister nominee Cho Kuk this Friday. After a meeting Wednesday between the floor leaders of the ruling and main opposition parties, they said they still have differences, but they decided to hold the hearing to fulfill the role of parliament.
It is the responsibility of the National Assembly to hold a confirmation hearing. There have been a lot of differences among us, but we agreed to hold the hearing to fulfill our duty.
President Moon Jae-in had asked Parliament to send a confirmation hearing report on Cho by Friday, with lawmakers having missed the initial deadline earlier this week. A hearing initially scheduled for Monday and Tuesday was called off because of disagreements over whether members of Cho's family would be present to testify. Instead, Cho took the unprecedented step of holding a press conference at the National Assembly, where he denied the allegations against him and his family, such as suspicious investments in a private equity fund and his daughter receiving preferential academic treatment. Cho welcomed Wednesday's decision, vowing to prepare thoroughly for his hearing and clarify the allegations.
I will explain myself honestly at the confirmation hearing. I will tell lawmakers what I know, and I will also apologize for any missteps.
Despite the date being set, some opposition lawmakers see it as pointless, as the presidential office is expected to push ahead with Cho's appointment regardless. They're instead calling for a parliamentary investigation and a special counsel probe to look into the allegations raised against the candidate. Prosecutors have launched an investigation of their own, carrying out raids on dozens of locations.
All eyes are expected to be on the confirmation hearing on Friday. The ruling party is expected to defend Cho, claiming he is fit for the job to carry out the Moon administration's reform drive, while the main opposition party will try to make the case that Cho's nomination should be scrapped. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
According to South Korea's Trade Ministry, Japan submitted its own opinion on Seoul's decision to remove it from its list of trusted trading partners. Japan apparently called the decision arbitrary retaliation, but that's a claim Seoul is rejecting. Kim Hye-sun reports.
South Korea's Trade Ministry has rejected Japan's claim that removing Tokyo from a list of preferred trading partners would be arbitrary retaliation. In a statement, the ministry said the measure announced August 12th is meant to classify countries whose export control systems run counter to basic international agreements. Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry had submitted its opinion to Korea's Trade Ministry Tuesday night, the deadline for a 20-day public opinion gathering process. Tokyo said if Seoul goes ahead with the removal without, in its words, answering questions about its rationale and other details, then the revision would be assumed to be an arbitrary and illegitimate countermeasure against Japan. Korea's Trade Ministry said it had notified Japan about the issue via other channels before the official announcement, and that it is ready to sit down for talks with Japan anytime. Removing Japan from the list would mean stricter conditions on Korean companies exporting strategic goods to Japan, and the approval process could also take around 15 days, up from the current 5. Japan announced new export curbs on South Korea in July and removed South Korea from its own whitelist on August 28th, citing an alleged lack of export controls on Korea's part. Amid the ongoing tensions on the trade and military fronts, Japan's Foreign Minister Taro Kono said in a Bloomberg op-ed that the heart of the problem is whether the promises between Seoul and Tokyo to normalize their relations in 1965 will be kept or not. After further regulatory and legal reviews, South Korea is expected to decide whether to remove Japan from its whitelist sometime this month. Kim Hye-sun, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics is said to have started using a Korean-made etching gas to make its semiconductors instead of the Japanese product that Tokyo's now restricting. A Samsung official said today that locally made materials are now being used as a replacement in certain processes. South Korea's Trade Ministry also announced that testing time for certifications will be cut by up to half for some major parts, materials and equipment to help accelerate technological development. The ministry has signed agreements with certification agencies like the Korea Laboratory Accreditation Scheme and said fast-track testing for semiconductors, displays and other products will start tomorrow. The Korea Customs Service is going to inspect industrial products imported from Japan more thoroughly to check for high levels of radiation. In a written response to a question from lawmakers today, the agency said it will use new equipment to check radiation levels on site rather than sending off samples for tests, which takes more than a week. The Customs Service said it will ask the government to triple the number of employees doing the inspections. Japanese auto sales in Korea are continuing to nosedive amid the ongoing boycott of Japanese goods triggered by a trade spat between Seoul and Tokyo. According to the Korea Automobile Manufacturers Association on Wednesday, Japanese car sales tumbled 56.9% on year to around 1,400 vehicles in August. This compared to the 17.2% on-year fall posted in July when the boycott first began. This has corresponded to a falling share of Japanese autos in the Korean market, down to 7.7% last month compared to 16.9% a year before. Meanwhile, North Korea has called on Japan to immediately cancel its plan to dump radioactive waste into the Pacific Ocean, saying it would be a crime against humanity and a, quote, nuclear disaster for the Korean Peninsula and the world. An article in the state-run newspaper Nodong Shinmun today said that Japan is the only country that, quote, blindly discharges nuclear waste in a way that threatens its own people and other countries. The paper urged Japan to listen to the global community. Early last month, the Greenpeace branch in Seoul reported that Japan is planning to discharge more than 1 million litres of contaminated wastewater from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant. About a week ago, the government posted a video online showing Japan's use of forced labour during the Second World War. That video has now more than 100,000 views, getting sympathy and attention from around the world. Kan Young-yu tells us more.
It's not your fault. That's the first sentence that appears in an online video about the issue of Japan's use of Koreans for forced labor during World War II. It was uploaded last week by the Korean Culture and Information Service, a state-run agency, and at 4 minutes long, it's gotten more than 130,000 views. Its message: the use of forced labor during Japanese colonial period should not be overlooked in history. Quoting victims and witnesses, the video shows faded photographs of the people forced to work for Japan and explains how they lacked basic human rights. Then it compares how Germany and Japan have dealt differently with their World War II atrocities. Berlin took responsibility for its war crimes, apologized to the victims, and compensated them for their suffering. On the other hand, after the South Korean Supreme Court ruled in favor of Korean victims and ordered Japanese companies to pay them damages, Tokyo retaliated with economic sanctions against Seoul. The video ends with a U.S. professor's quote: "Unless Japan makes more consistent and far-reaching efforts to achieve reconciliation with its neighbors, Asia will always be precariously close to another economic or military crisis." The video is provided in both Korean and English, and it can be found on the official YouTube channel KoreaNet or the Facebook page Korea Clickers. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
In other news, with politicians in the UK battling over the terms of the country's exit from the European Union, global business groups are expressing fears that a potential no-deal Brexit will amount to chaos not only in Britain but across the world. Oh Soo-young reports.
Korea's business sector has expressed concerns about the United Kingdom leaving the European Union without an exit agreement. The Federation of Korean Industry said Wednesday that it signed an open letter with major lobby groups from 7 other countries. Representing more than 4 million companies, The groups voiced grave concerns that a no-deal Brexit would create, quote, substantial disruption for businesses, workers, farmers and regulators in the UK, as well as their own countries. This would result in disruptions to jobs, consumer choices, as well as to the cost of goods and services. The group spoke out a day after UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson lost his first House of Commons vote on Tuesday. MPs, including dissidents from Johnson's own Conservative Party, voted to gain control of the parliamentary agenda in order to bring forth a bill requesting a delay to Brexit to prevent a no-deal withdrawal from happening. They want to postpone the UK's exit to January 31st, unless Parliament agrees on a new deal or votes in favour of a no-deal Brexit by mid-October. Johnson has said his government would leave the EU with or without a deal by the current October 31st deadline. Amid escalating pressure, he raised the stakes by saying he would ask for a snap general election if MPs push through the anti-no-deal bill. Under UK law, support from at least two-thirds of the 650 MPs in Parliament is needed to call an early election. Johnson's opponents are saying there should still be a legislation to block a no-deal exit before an election takes place, amid fears it could sow chaos in the British economy, as well as its trade ties and supply chains around the world. Observers say the upcoming vote to secure a 3-month Brexit delay is likely to pass on Thursday. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The official logo for the 2022 Qatar World Cup was unveiled in Doha on Tuesday, the first tournament to be held in the Middle East and during the winter season. According to FIFA, the logo is in the shape of the iconic World Cup trophy with many symbolic elements. The number 8 is in reference to the 8 venues that will host the matches, and it also resembles the infinity symbol representing the interconnected nature of the global sporting event. It also alludes to a traditional Arab woolen shawl to signify regional culture and winter. The typeface accompanying the logo is a contemporary twist on traditional Arabic calligraphy. The event will take place from November 21st to December 18th. The southeastern Korean city of Wonju is hosting a festival of dance this week. All kinds of dancing by performers from around the world in the form of a carnival. Or Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
Over 100 local dance teams and 34 foreign teams have gathered in Wonju, Gangwon-do province to show off their dance skills. The Wonju Dynamic Dancing Carnival opened its doors this Tuesday, and teams from as far afield as Russia, Taiwan, and Singapore have made the trip to Korea to show off their cultural performances in an attempt to win the grand prize. The participants will first need to go through 2 preliminary rounds to be one of the best 12 teams that will compete in the final on Sunday.
And we arrived to South Korea to dancing and win. I wish other participants good luck.
All kinds of dance are allowed, but dancers must perform them in a parade. These dances can be seen mainly in the Datu Performance Hall and along Wonillo Street in the north of the city. Visitors come to this carnival not only to watch the global dances, but also to learn from the performances.
I came here to watch with my daughter, even though it's a weekday, because I heard it's a global carnival. I also thought this would be a nice opportunity for my daughter who is preparing to study ballet.
According to Wonju Cultural Foundation, the theme of this year's opening ceremony is Beyond 100, commemorating the 100th anniversary of establishment of Korea's provisional government. The ceremony reflects South Korea's aspirations to promote its cultural identity and become one of the world's leaders in cultural self-power. Marking the opening ceremony, a choir of 1,000 citizens along with a classical musician sang Korea's traditional song Arirang, and the flying performance group Nalda made the national flag of Korea. The main ceremony each day until the festival ends on Sunday will feature renowned singers like Davichi and Kukastan, who will also meet and greet the visitors at the Tattoo Performance Hall. Visitors can also enjoy a flea market, food trucks, and a fringe festival where professionals perform mimes, theater, musicals, and bubble shows. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News, Wonju.
South Korea's foreign exchange reserves dipped on month in August. The Bank of Korea says the reserves amounted to $401 billion last month, down $1.6 billion from July. The central bank attributed the fall to the stronger greenback, which pulled down the value of other foreign currency assets held by South Korea. As of the end of July, South Korea had the world's 9th largest foreign exchange reserves, with China topping the list. 5 companies are said to have made preliminary bids for a stake in Asiana Airlines. Market sources say the leading bids for a 31% stake in Korea's second-largest carrier come from cosmetics firm econ, stock brokerage company Mirae Asset Daewoo, and activist fund Korea Corporate Governance Improvement. econ is the only one out of those 3 with experience in the airline business, owning Korean budget carrier Jeju Air. Industry observers estimate the price of the deal to be roughly $1.6 billion. The airline's #1 shareholder, Kumo Industrial, plans to complete the sale by the end of this year. A royal folding screen from the late Joseon dynasty, which has been kept in the US, will be displayed in a public exhibition in Korea next year for the first time in decades. Haeak Pandodo depicts the sea, cranes and peaches, which symbolize the prosperity, health and longevity of the royal family. An American businessman purchased the screen in the 1920s and was later donated to the Dayton Art Institute in Ohio. For the next couple of months, Seoul will be hosting architects and urban planners from around the world to gather ideas on making cities more people and eco-friendly. The second edition of the Seoul Biennial of Architecture and Urbanism starts on Saturday. Architects and urban experts from around 80 cities will present their projects at a number of Seoul landmarks, including the Dongdaemun Design Plaza and the Tonimun Museum Village. The event will run through November 10th. That has been your 3-minute news flash.
The autumn monsoon has drenched the entire nation today, and as for the central region, a downpour of more than 300 millimeters is expected.
Certainly a wet one. For more details, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Now, rain alerts have been issued for the central region now, and until Friday, rain clouds will gather in the northern half of the nation, now leaving the southern regions with clear skies and rain-free conditions tomorrow. And as the precipitation focuses on the central region, some parts of Gyeonggi-do province, Chungcheongnam-do province, and also the west side of the Gangwon-do province will be drenched with over 200 millimeters of more rain until Friday. Now, the rest of the country will receive up to 120 millimeters of precipitation. Now, after this round of autumn monsoon rain weakens, the nation will be influenced by Typhoon Ling over the weekend. So, until Sunday, we should stay alert for the forecast and take necessary precautions. Now, taking a look at our temperature readings for tomorrow, morning lows will be about a couple of degrees higher than today, mostly lingering at around 23 degrees Celsius. And the daily highs are expected to soar, Seoul reaching up to 29 degrees, and Daegu up to 30, and Busan 29, while Jeju tops 30 as well. Now, I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that will wrap it up for this edition of Arirang News. Thank you, as always, for watching.
News in Depth is next.